Her last TikTok predicted her death. The video was 47 seconds long, that was all. 47 seconds of a 22-year-old woman standing in her apartment kitchen at 11:52 on a Thursday night, lip-syncing to an audio trend that had already been used 6 million times that week. She wore a gray oversized hoodie, and her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun. Her eyes were doing the exaggerated comedic expression the audio called for, wide, then narrowed, then a slow blink of mock disbelief. She was good at it. She had the kind of natural ease in front of a camera that most people spend years trying to manufacture. In the background, the ordinary geography of a small Nashville apartment, a string of warm fairy lights above the kitchen window, a half-eaten bowl of cereal on the counter. A coat hung over a chair. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that would make a person look twice. She finished the lip sync, pointed finger guns at the camera, grinned that grin, wide and unguarded, the one her followers had come to love, and the video ended. 47 seconds. Posted at 11:52 p.m. under her username at Mia_calls. Caption, me pretending I'm not exhausted, good night, loves. She got 412 likes in the first hour. Then she went to bed. By the following Friday, she was dead. The video had 41 million views, and a forensic analyst at the Nashville Metropolitan Police Department was watching it frame by frame, pausing it at the 29th second, and saying something very quietly to the detective beside her that made the room go completely still. The detective's name was Sandra Obi. She was 41 years old. Mountain had been with Nashville Metro for 14 years and had a reputation among her colleagues for two things: patience and the particular quality of attention she brought to evidence that other people had already decided was unimportant. She had watched the video 11 times before she called in the forensic analyst. The first 6 times, she had watched it the way everyone else had looked at Mia, at her face, her expression, the kitchen behind her. On the 7th watch, she had changed her focus. She had stopped watching Mia entirely. She had started watching the background, the fairy lights above the window, the coat on the chair, the half-eaten cereal bowl, the window itself dark outside, the Nashville street 4 floors below invisible in the night. And on the 29th second, in the window's dark glass, it barely visible but absolutely there if you were looking for a shape. Not furniture, not a reflection of the kitchen, a shape that was approximately the height and width of a standing adult, positioned at an angle that placed them not at the window but behind it. Inside the apartment, standing in the hallway that connected the kitchen to the bedroom, standing perfectly still, watching Mia record her video, while Mia smiled at her phone and pointed finger guns at the camera and said goodnight to her followers and had no idea she was not alone. When Sandra showed the frame to her colleague, Detective Ray Horton, 15 years on the force, deeply skeptical by nature, he leaned forward, looked at the paused screen for a long time, and said nothing. Then he said, "Play it again." Sandra played it again. Ray Horton watched the window the entire time. At the 29th second, he said, "Stop." She stopped. He looked at the shape in the glass. He was quiet for another long moment. Then he said, "Who else has seen this?" Sandra said, 41 million people. Horton said, no, who else has seen it?" And Sandra understood the distinction completely because she had been thinking about it herself since the 7th watch. 41 million people had watched the video. Probably 30 million of them had watched it more than once, sharing it, commenting, stitching it, duetting it, posting reaction videos that themselves had millions of views. They had watched Mia. They had felt the eerie power of a young woman's last recorded moments. It had read the comments that said things like, "Rest in peace, Angel," and "I can't stop watching this," and she had no idea. But almost none of them had looked at the window. Almost none of them had looked past Mia to the dark glass behind her and asked the question that Sandra Obi had been asking since the 7th watch. Who is that standing in the hallway? Mia Calloway had been found by her best friend, Danny Cho, on a Saturday morning. Danny had a standing arrangement every Saturday at 9. They met at the coffee shop 2 blocks from Mia's building. When Mia didn't show and didn't answer her phone, Danny had gone to the building. The super had let her in. The apartment door was unlocked. Danny had pushed it open and called Mia's name once. And then she had seen something from the doorway that She would describe to police 3 times in 3 separate interviews, each time in a slightly different order, but always with the same ending. The Nashville Metro First Response Unit arrived at 9:47 a.m. The cause of death was established within 48 hours. The case was classified as a homicide, and the video which Mia had posted less than 10 hours before her body was found had already been live for 16 hours by the time the first officers entered the apartment. It already had 300,000 views. By the time Sandra Obi watched it for the 7th time, it had 41 million. By the time she paused it at the 29th second and found the shape in the window, it was the most watched video on the platform. And somewhere in those 41 million views, hidden in the comment section, buried under hundreds of thousands of responses, using an account with no profile picture and a username that was a random string of numbers, one person had commented at 2:17 a.m., less than 3 hours after the video was posted, a single sentence: "You looked beautiful tonight." The comment had been posted before Mia's body was found, before any news of her death had been reported, before anyone outside the apartment building had any reason to know that something was wrong. It sat there in the comment section for 31 hours before anyone noticed it. By then, the account that had posted it had been deleted. But deleted, as Sandra Obi well knew, was not the same as gone. Nothing on the internet was ever truly gone. And that 4 comment words, when posted in the small hours of a Friday morning by a person who had no right to know what Mia had looked like that night unless they had been there, was the first thread. And Sandra Obi intended to pull it until the whole thing unraveled. Before the 41 million, there were 412. That was how many people liked Mia Calloway's final video in the first hour after she posted it, at 11:52 p.m. on Thursday. Most of them were her regulars, the core of her following, the people who turned on post notifications for her account, who had been watching her since she was a nursing student in her dorm room at Vanderbilt, making study break videos that were equal parts exhaustion and humor and warmth. She had 180,000 followers by the time she died, or which in the world of social media is not famous exactly, but is the specific, meaningful kind of visibility where strangers feel they know you. Her comment sections were full of people who called her sis and bestie and literally me. She replied to comments every day, usually between classes or during her lunch break at the hospital, where she completed her clinical hours. She remembered names. She replied to the same people repeatedly, building something that felt less like a following and more like a community. This was the version of Mia that 41 million people encountered when they watched her last video. The warm, funny, slightly tired young woman doing a lip sync in her kitchen and saying goodnight to people who cared about her. And this version was real. It was genuinely, completely real. But it was not the complete picture. Because the complete picture of Mia Calloway's life in the 6 weeks before her death was considerably more complicated than anything her TikTok showed. Her best friend Danny Cho had known her for 4 years since their first week at Vanderbilt, when they had been assigned adjacent seats in a general chemistry lecture, and Danny had leaned over and whispered, "I have no idea what's happening." And Mia had whispered back, "Neither does the professor, I think." They had been inseparable since that afternoon. Danny knew Mia the way only a best friend can know someone, not just the public face, not just the person on camera, but the 3 a.m. version, the crying version, the version that sent voice notes at 7 minutes long while walking between classes. Yes, the version that overthought everything and underexplained her own feelings to avoid being a burden. Danny knew all of this, which was why, when detectives came to interview her 2 days after Mia's body was found, she was able to tell them something that no one else could have. Mia had been scared. Not of one specific thing, not dramatically, not in a way she had named clearly, but in the specific way that Danny, who loved her and paid attention, had noticed over the previous 6 weeks. A new kind of quietness, a pause before she answered her phone that hadn't been there before, a tendency, new and uncharacteristic, to check the lock on her apartment door twice when Danny visited. She never used to do that, Danny told Detective Obi, her voice steady but her hands not. She'd walk in and leave the door basically open. The last few weeks, she locked it behind us every single time. I asked her about it once. She said she'd just been watching too many true crime videos. Danny paused. I believed her. I don't know why. I believed her. The boyfriend, Ryan Essler, 26, who worked in sales for a software company and had been with Mia for 14 months, was interviewed within 24 hours of the body being found. He was tall, conventionally good-looking, with the kind of smooth social ease that makes people trust you faster than they probably should. He answered every question directly. He cried at appropriate moments. He said he had last seen Mia on Tuesday evening, 2 days before she posted the video. They had dinner at a restaurant on Broadway. He had gone home at 10. They had texted until midnight. And that was the last time he heard from her. He could show detectives the texts. He could show them the restaurant receipt. He was cooperative in the specific, surface way of someone who has thought about how cooperative looks. Detective Obi noted this in her interview notes with a small asterisk and moved on, because cooperation and innocence are not the same thing, and surface and depth are not the same thing either. She would come back to Ryan Essler, but first she had a comment to trace. The comment "You look beautiful tonight" had been posted at 2:17 a.m. by an account with a username that was 12 random digits and no profile picture, no followers, no following, no other posts. The account had been created at 11:58 p.m., 6 minutes after Mia posted the video. It had existed for 2 hours and 19 minutes before being deleted. Michael, the platform's legal team responded to the Nashville Metro subpoena within 48 hours with the account's registration data, a burner email address and an IP address that resolved to a public Wi-Fi network at a 24-hour diner on Nolensville Road, 4 miles from Mia's apartment. The timestamp of the comment matched the diner's operating hours. Sandra Obi pulled the diner's security camera footage for 2:17 a.m. on Friday morning. There were 6 people in the diner at that time. She pulled still images of all 6. She started running them. And then her phone rang. It was Danny Cho. She said, "Detective, I just watched the video again. I've watched it probably 50 times this week, but I just watched it again and I stopped it. I don't know why I stopped it, I just did. And I think there's someone standing in her hallway." Sandra was already at her desk. She already had the video open. She said, "Which second?" Danny said, "Around 29. Sandra said, "I know." There was a long silence on the line. Then Danny said very quietly, "She didn't know he was there, did she?" And Sandra said, "No, I don't know. I don't think she did." What Sandra did not tell Danny, what she had not yet told anyone outside the investigation, was that the shape in the window was not the only thing she had found in the video. On the 41st second, 1 second before the finger guns and the grin that ended the video, in the lower right corner of the frame, partially obscured by the edge of the counter, there was a shadow. Not the shadow of the coat on the chair, not the shadow of the kitchen fixtures. A shadow with a different angle, with you falling in a direction inconsistent with the apartment's single overhead light. A shadow that moved. One frame only barely there, gone in an instant, but Sandra had paused on it, and she had not been able to unpause in her mind since. Because if the shape in the hallway was one person, and the shadow in the corner was another, then Mia Calloway had not been alone with one person that night. She had been alone with 2. Mia Calloway grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, the younger of 2 daughters born to a high school teacher and a hospital administrator. She was the kind of child that teachers remember not because she was the loudest or the most obviously brilliant, but because of the specific quality of attention she brought to everything. She listened completely. She remembered things people told her weeks after they said them. Well, she had a way of making people feel in conversation like they were the most interesting person in the room, a quality that translated on camera into the warmth that had built her following one honest comment reply at a time. She had wanted to be a nurse since she was 14, when her grandmother had a long hospital stay, and Mia had spent hours watching the nurses move through the ward purposefully, calm, bringing order to places of doubt and fear. She had said to her mother on the drive home from one of those visits, "That's what I want to do. I want to be the person that makes it less scary." She said it at 14, and she had not changed her mind once. She was in her final year of nursing school at Vanderbilt when she died. She had 12 weeks of clinical hours left. She had already been offered a position at Vanderbilt University Medical Center upon graduation. She was going to be extraordinary at it. Everyone who worked with her during clinicals said so, unprompted, to Detective Obi when she spoke to the hospital staff. The charge nurse used the word "natural" 3 times in a single sentence. It was the kind of word people use when they're trying to describe something that goes beyond training. Mia Calloway was going to save lives, and someone had taken hers before she had the chance. The 6 weeks before her death had been different. This was what everyone who knew her agreed on, independently, without being led there by any specific question. Her mother noticed first a subtle shift in the frequency of their calls, which had always been daily and became every other day, and then, yet in the final 2 weeks, every 3 days. Her mother had asked if everything was okay. Mia had said yes, she was just swamped with clinicals. Her mother had believed it because it was plausible Mia was always working, always exhausted, always pushing. But in the last call they ever had, 5 days before the video was posted, her mother told Detective Obi that Mia had said something she couldn't stop thinking about. It came near the end of the call, offhandedly, as if it was not important and that offhandedness was the thing that was now impossible to unhear. Mia had said, "Mom, if I ever tell you something feels wrong, promise me you'll believe me." Her mother had said, slightly confused, "Of course, baby. Has something happened?" And Mia had said, "No, I just wanted to know." And then she had changed the subject to her clinical rotation schedule, and the call had ended 15 minutes later with the usual, "I love you, talk tomorrow." There was no call tomorrow. That conversation 5 days before her death, the offhand question about being believed, sat in Detective Obi's interview notes with 2 asterisks and a question mark. Because Mia Calloway, who told her best friend she had been watching too many true crime videos, who checked the lock twice, who asked her mother for a hypothetical promise, Mia had known something. She had known something was wrong. She had just not known how to say it in a way that would reach someone in time. Ryan Esler's alibi for Thursday night, the night of the video, the night of the death, was his apartment across town. He lived alone. He said he had been home since 10 p.m. He had ordered delivery, had watched a movie, and had gone to sleep around midnight. The delivery could be confirmed. The app showed the order, placed at 10:22, delivered at 10:51. The movie could not be confirmed. His phone had pinged a cell tower consistent with his home address throughout the night. This was solid. This was the kind of alibi that, in most cases, closes a door. Sandra Obi noted it in the file and left the door open anyway. Because 14 months is long enough for a controlling person to learn every habit a person has, long enough to know when they go to sleep, how they move through their apartment, which window faces the street, long enough to know things that can be useful in ways that don't require your phone to leave your apartment. She kept the door open. But she also, on the same day she confirmed Ryan's alibi, received a piece of information from the building superintendent that sent her attention in a completely different direction. The man in apartment 4B, directly across the hall from Mia's apartment 4A, had a prior restraining order filed against him by a tenant in his previous building. His name was Marcus Webb. He was 29 years old. He had moved into the building 8 weeks ago, 2 weeks before Mia's behavior changed. Sandra Obi pulled Marcus Webb's file. The restraining order was 2 years old, filed by a woman in a Murfreesboro apartment complex who claimed Webb had been leaving items outside her door and had appeared outside her workplace on 2 occasions. The order had expired without renewal. Webb had no criminal record beyond a speeding ticket. He had a warehouse manager position he had held for 3 years and no documented history of violence. On paper, he was a person with one concerning incident in his past and nothing else. But the timing was wrong in a way that Sandra could not stop looking at. He had moved into apartment 4 weeks ago. Mia's behavior had changed 6 weeks ago. Mia's apartment was directly across a hallway that was exactly 14 feet wide. Sandra added Marcus Webb's name to the board in her office. She drew a line. She put a question mark at the end of it. Then she went back to the video. Because the shape in the hallway and the shadow in the corner were still there, still unidentified, and no amount of information about Ryan Esler or Marcus Webb was going to change the fact that someone had been inside that apartment while Mia was recording. Well, the comments on the video had become their own ecosystem by this point. A living, evolving thing that was simultaneously a memorial, a public investigation, a conspiracy board, and a grief space. True crime communities on every platform had descended on the video and were frame by frame analyzing it in their own ways. some finding things that weren't there, some missing things that were. One account, run by a 24-year-old in Minnesota who went by the handle at True Crime Tegan, posted a video breaking down the 29-second that got 4 million views overnight. She had found the shape in the hallway. She circled it in red. She said, "This is a person. This is a person standing there. Why is nobody talking about this?" 30 seconds after her video was posted, Sandra Obi's phone rang. It was her lieutenant. "Oh," he said, "the internet found it." Sandra said, "I know." He said, "How long have you known?" She said, "Since the 7th watch." He said, "How many watches are you on?" She said, "I stopped counting." The comment section of Mia Calloway's final TikTok was, by the end of the first week, one of the most read comment sections in the history of the platform. It had over 200,000 individual comments. It had been screenshotted, archived, analyzed, and posted to Reddit threads that themselves generated hundreds of thousands of responses. Within it, buried in the sheer volume of grief and speculation and horror, were things that mattered. Sandra Obi had assigned 2 junior detectives to read it in its entirety, a task that took them 4 days working in shifts, flagging anything that seemed unusual, specific, or inconsistent with the reaction of a stranger encountering the video for the first time. They flagged 112 comments. Sandra reviewed all of them. She narrowed the list to 7. Of those 7, 3 were from accounts that had since been deleted. One of the deleted accounts was the original "You looked beautiful tonight" comment from 2:17 a.m. The second was a comment posted at 4:44 a.m., less than 5 hours after the video went live, that said, "She always made everything look so easy." The third was posted at 9:03 a.m. Friday morning, 6 hours before Mia's body was found, by an account that had been active for 4 months, had 22 followers, and had never commented on anything else before this video. All 3 accounts had been deleted between Friday evening and Saturday morning, the period immediately surrounding the discovery of Mia's body. Sandra looked at the timing. She thought about what it meant to delete an account not before a crime, but after, when the risk was greatest, when the comments were being read by millions of people, when staying invisible was suddenly urgent. Whoever had posted those comments had watched the video, had watched it at 2 in the morning, had come back to watch it again at 4, and had come back once more at 9, when the night was over and something else had begun. The comments were not the behavior of a stranger following a viral trend. They were the behavior of someone who had been there. So Danny Cho spent the first week in a state that she would later describe to a grief counselor as functional dissociation, doing the ordinary things, eating and sleeping and answering messages, while feeling entirely removed from herself. She went through Mia's Instagram, her Snapchat, her text history, not for investigation purposes, not initially, but because looking at Mia's words and Mia's face was the only thing that made the reality of the absence feel less absolute. She found something in the Instagram DMs on the 4th day that she had not been looking for. Mia had a category of message requests, unaccepted DMs from people she didn't follow, that she had apparently not cleared in months. There were hundreds of them. Most were ordinary fan messages, the kind that accumulate when you have a public account. But one thread, would have started 6 weeks before Mia's death, was different. The account was named at colin.v.photo, a photography account, publicly accessible with a curated grid of landscape photographs, 312 followers, and a bio that said, "Light Chaser, Nashville, DM for shoots." The thread began with a message to Mia that said, "Love your content. Would you ever want to collaborate on a creative shoot?" Mia had never accepted the message request. She had never responded. But she had, at some point, the app timestamped this, opened the thread. She had looked at it. She had not replied, and she had not blocked the account. She had simply left it there, unaccepted, the way you leave something you're not sure about, not inviting it in, but not closing the door either. The last message in the thread sent by @colin.vibe. Monday photo was dated 4 days before Mia's death. It said, "I think I've seen you around the neighborhood. Small world." Danny stared at her phone for a long time. Then she called Detective Obi. Sandra ran the account immediately. At colin.v.photo, real name, per the platform's registration data. Colin Vreed, 31 years old, Nashville, Tennessee. no criminal record, a Tennessee driver's license with an address in the Wedgwood, Houston neighborhood 2.5 miles from Mia's apartment. His public photography account was clean and aesthetically coherent, no red flags in the posted content, no comments that stood out. But the registration data for the account showed something Sandra noted immediately. The account had been created 7 weeks ago, 1 week before the first DM to Mia, 1 week before Mia's behavior changed. Sandra pulled his driver's license photo. She looked at it for a long time. Then she went back to the security camera footage from the 24-hour diner on Nolensville Road, the footage from 2:17 a.m. on Friday morning, when the "You looked beautiful tonight" comment was posted. She pulled up the still images of the 6 people in the diner at that time. She looked at the second figure from the left, a man seated alone in a booth, his face partially angled away from the camera, a phone visible in his hand. She placed the driver's license photo beside the still image. She looked at them together. She called Ray Horton into her office. She pointed at the screen. She said, "I think I know who posted the comment." Horton looked at both images for a long time. Then he said, "Can we place him at the apartment?" Sandra said, "Not yet." "Come on." Horton said, "Then we need more." Sandra said, "I know, but look at this." She pulled up the video again. She played it. She paused at the 29th second. She pointed at the shape in the hallway. She said, "That is a person. We agree on that." Horton said yes. She said, "The hallway connects the kitchen to the bedroom. The front door of the apartment is at the other end of the hallway to the right of the bedroom." She paused. If someone came in through the front door while Mia was in the kitchen, setting up her phone to record, if they came in quietly and she didn't hear them, they would be standing exactly there, at the kitchen end of the hallway, watching her while she recorded. Horton was quiet. Sandra said, "She unlocked her door for someone that night. Or someone had a key." She paused the video, rewound. Maya played it again from the beginning. Watched Mia's face, the ease, the performance, the grin at the end. She didn't know, Sandra said. She had no idea. She was making a TikTok and she had no idea. She paused the video on Mia's grin, the finger guns, the good night, and sat there looking at it. Then she said, "Or." Horton said, "Or what?" Sandra said, "Or she did know, and she made the video anyway because she wanted us to find it." The room was very quiet. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Sandra unpinned the video from her screen and opened Colin Vrede's file. There was a lot of work left to do. Thursday began ordinarily for Mia Calloway. Her alarm went off at 6:15. She had a clinical shift at Vanderbilt University Medical Center starting at 7:30. And she moved through her morning routine with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been waking up early for years, coffee first, always, then a quick scroll through her notifications while she waited for it to brew, then the specific focused energy of getting ready for a hospital shift where being late was not acceptable. Her phone showed, in the data later recovered by digital forensics, that she had opened TikTok at 6:22 and spent 4 minutes scrolling before closing it. She had opened her messages and replied to 2 from Danny, who had sent her a meme at midnight and a follow-up at 6 a.m. with a string of laughing emojis and a voice note that Danny would later describe to investigators as completely normal, cheerful, slightly rushed, making a joke about the cereal she was eating. The voice note was 38 seconds long. It was the last voice message Danny ever received from her. Mia left her apartment at 7:10. The building's lobby camera captured her at 7:11, dark hair down, nursing scrubs, backpack on one shoulder, coffee in hand moving through the lobby toward the front door. She did not look toward the elevator. She did not look toward the stairs. She did not look over her shoulder. She looked like someone with a shift to go to, which is exactly what she was. The lobby camera also captured, at 7:17, 6 minutes after Mia left the building, the door to apartment 4B opened. Marcus Webb walked out, checked his mail, went back inside. Sandra Obi noted the 6-minute gap. She noted it and moved on, because the gap was suggestive and nothing more, and she needed more than suggestion. Meanwhile, the hospital shift ran from 7:30 to 5 p.m. Mia worked a pediatric oncology floor that day, the hardest floor in the building, the one that required the most from its staff, The one that Mia had specifically requested for her clinical rotation, because she said when asked that the patients there needed advocates more than anywhere else. The supervising nurse, a woman named Claudette, who had been on the floor for 11 years, told Sandra that Mia had been quieter than usual that day. Not distracted, she was never distracted during patient care, which Claudette said with a firmness that made clear this was important, but in the margins, during breaks, during the walk between rooms. Quieter. She sat in the break room at lunch and just looked at her phone, Claudette said. Not scrolling, just looking at it. I asked if she was okay, and she said yes, just tired. Claudette paused. I should have pushed. I know that now. She had a look that I've seen in patients' families, that look like someone carrying something they haven't figured out how to put down yet. I recognized it, and I didn't push. She said this last sentence the way people say things they will carry for a long time. Sandra wrote it down and did not offer reassurance, because reassurance would have been a kind of untruth, and Claudette deserved better than that. What Mia was looking at on her phone during her lunch break, recovered from her phone's screen activity log by the Digital Forensics Unit, was the Instagram message thread, the one from @colin.v. Show photo, specifically the last message. I think I've seen you around the neighborhood. Small world. She had opened the thread at 12:47 p.m. and closed it at 12:53. 6 minutes of looking at 6 words. She did not reply. She did not block. She closed the app and opened her contacts and began typing a name. The forensics log showed she opened a contact, had the call screen up for 4 seconds, and then closed it without calling. The contact she had opened was Ryan Essler. She had almost called her boyfriend, and she hadn't. She had put her phone in her pocket and gone back to the floor. Sandra looked at that 4-second moment for a long time. A person stands with their finger over a call button for 4 seconds and then does not press it. What stops them? Fear of being dismissed? Fear of sounding irrational? Or something more specific about Ryan in particular that made calling him in that moment feel like the wrong choice? Sandra flagged the moment. 2 asterisks. She moved on. After the shift, Mia went to the grocery store where her card was used at a Kroger on Charlotte Avenue at 5:42 p.m. She bought cereal, milk, pasta, and 2 bottles of wine. One of those bottles was open on her counter when her body was found. The other was untouched. She texted Danny at 6:15. Just got home. Tired but okay. Watching something dumb tonight. Self-care. Danny replied with a heart emoji. At 6:45, Mia's building lobby camera showed her coming back through the front door, the grocery bag in one hand, phone in the other. She pressed the elevator button. She waited. And here was the thing that Sandra Obi returned to every time she reviewed the lobby footage. The thing that she had watched 12 times and could not stop watching. While Mia waited for the elevator, she looked up. Not at the elevator display, at the staircase. Specifically at the landing visible above the first floor staircase door, where the second floor landing was partially visible. She looked at it for approximately 3 seconds. Then the elevator arrived and she got in. There was nothing on the landing, no person, no movement, nothing the camera could identify. But Mia had looked. Something had made her look. And she had looked at it in the specific way of someone who has been looking at a particular spot for a while. Not startled, not casually glancing, but checking. The way you check a place you have checked before. So she was in her apartment from approximately 6:50 p.m. Her phone showed a Netflix session beginning at 7. She was watching a cooking competition, the last thing she ever watched. At 9:30, she opened TikTok and spent 20 minutes scrolling. At 10:45, she texted her mother, "Good night, Mom. Long day. Talk tomorrow. I love you." Her mother sent back a string of hearts. At 11:40, the TikTok app opened again. The video, 47 seconds, lip sync, the grin, the finger guns was recorded and uploaded at 11:52. The platform's data showed it was recorded in one take. She did not re-record it. She did not review it before posting. She recorded it, posted it, and then based on the phone's activity log, put the phone down on the kitchen counter screen up. She never picked it up again. At 11:58 p.m., 6 minutes after the video was posted, the account that would later comment that "you looked beautiful tonight" was created. At 12:04 a.m., 12 minutes after the video, Mia's building's lobby camera showed the front door open from the outside. Someone entered the building. The camera angle captured only the lower half of the person, dark pants, dark shoes, a jacket hem. They turned immediately toward the stairs rather than the elevator. That was the last thing the lobby camera showed that night. And somewhere between that moment and 9:47 the following morning, when the Nashville Metro First Response Unit arrived, everything ended. Detective Sandra Obi had two rules she had developed across 14 years of investigative work, neither of which she had ever written down, but both of which she applied without exception. But the first was, follow the behavior, not the alibi. The second was, the person who volunteers the most information early is often the person managing what you find out. Ryan Esler had been cooperative from the first interview. Cooperative and present, he had come to the station without a lawyer on the first occasion, had answered every question, had cried at two separate points during the interview in ways that had looked genuine to everyone in the room. He had sent Sandra a text 2 days after the interview asking if there was any update, which he framed as concern. He had posted on his own Instagram a tribute to Mia that had 10,000 likes and included the phrase, "She was my whole world," beneath a photograph of the two of them from a camping trip 6 months before her death. Sandra had looked at the photograph for a long time. Onmeibaye in the photograph was smiling, but Sandra had looked at enough photographs in her career to know that smiling and happy were not always the same expression. Mia's smile in the camping photograph was surface level correct, and something underneath it was turned slightly inward, slightly away. Sandra could not put this in a report. She could not put it on the board with a string attached. But she could keep looking, and she did. The interviews with Mia's Vanderbilt classmates produced something Sandra had not expected. Two of them independently, in separate interviews conducted by different detectives, mentioned that Mia had said something about Ryan in the weeks before her death. Not a complaint exactly, not an accusation, something more ambiguous and therefore more concerning. The first classmate, a woman named Priya, once said Mia had mentioned during a study session that Ryan had started wanting to know her schedule in more detail than before. Which classes, which clinical shifts, what time she got home. Priya had said, "Doesn't that seem controlling?" And Mia had said something that Priya remembered almost exactly. "It's not controlling. He just worries. I think." Priya had noted the pause before "I think." She had noted it and not said anything, and was now sitting in an interview room telling a detective about it and clearly carrying the weight of the noting and not saying. The second classmate, a man named David, said Mia had shown him a text from Ryan once briefly on her phone screen before locking it and putting it away. He had not read the full text. Oh, he had read the beginning. "You need to tell me when you're going to be out late because That was all he had seen before the screen went dark. Mia had said, without prompting, "He just gets anxious. It's fine." David had not believed it was fine. He had not said so. He was saying so now in an interview room with the particular anguish of a person saying something 6 weeks too late. Sandra called Ryan Esler in for a second interview. This time she did not sit across from him with an open and receptive posture. She sat with the case file on the table and she asked him directly about the scheduled texts. He paused. For the first time in 2 interviews, he paused before answering a genuine pause. Not a performative thinking pause, but an actual recalibration. Then he said that yes, he had wanted to know her schedule was because he worried about her walking home late from clinicals, and he had been asking her to text him when she got home safely. Sandra said, was that a new request, or had he always done that? Another pause. He said it had been more recent. She said, why more recently? He said he wasn't sure. She said, had anything changed between them in the last 6 weeks? This pause was the longest. He said things had been a little strained. She asked him to tell her about the strain. He said they had argued nothing serious, just normal relationship friction. She asked what they had argued about. He said nothing specific. She asked, had Mia mentioned anyone new in her life in the past 6 or 7 weeks? A new friend, a new acquaintance? Ryan Esler looked at the table. He said, she mentioned someone, a photographer. She showed me his Instagram once. She said someone had DM'd her wanting to do a shoot. Sandra was very still. She said, what did you say when she showed you? Ryan said, I told her to ignore it. I said it was probably some guy trying to hit on her under the cover of a work thing. Sandra said, and what did she say? Ryan looked at his hands. He said, she said I was probably right. He paused. And then she closed the app, and we didn't talk about it again. He looked up. That photographer. Do you know who he is? Sandra looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, we're working on it. What she did not tell Ryan Esler was that they already knew who the photographer was. They had known for 48 hours. What they did not yet have was the bridge. The piece of evidence that placed Colin Vreede inside Mia Calloway's apartment on the night she died. They had the DM thread. They had the diner security footage that was suggestive but not definitive. They had the 3 deleted comments, the second of which, she always made everything look so easy, had been traced to a different IP address. A residential address in Wedgwood, Houston, Colin Vreede's registered address. The comment was posted at 4:44 a.m. from his home, which meant that wherever he had been at 2:17 a.m., whether it was the diner or somewhere else, by 4:44 a.m. he was home. And between 11:52 p.m. when the video was posted and 4:44 a.m. when he commented from his apartment, there were 4 hours and 52 minutes that Sandra Obi needed to account for. She went back to the video. She played it again. And she paused not at the 29th second this time, not at the shape in the hallway, but at the very beginning. The first frame, the kitchen, the fairy lights, the cereal bowl, the coat on the chair. She looked at the coat. She had looked at it before, but this time she looked at it differently because she had been to Mia's apartment now, had stood in the kitchen, and had looked at the chair. And the coat on the chair in the video was not the coat that was hanging on the hook by the front door of the apartment when the first officers arrived. It was a different coat, a coat she had not found anywhere in the apartment, a coat that, as far as the evidence record showed, had never existed. Sandra Obi set her coffee down. She stared at the first frame of the video, at the coat on the chair. She said, to the empty office, "Whose coat is that?" And the office said nothing back. But the question was now on the board with a string and a pin, and it was the right question. She could feel the specific feeling she had learned to trust across 14 years, the feeling that arrives when you have finally found the right thread. She picked up her phone. She called the forensic analyst. She said, "I need you to look at the first frame of the video, the coat on the kitchen chair. Tell me everything you can see about it." The analyst said, "Give me an hour." Sandra said, "You have 30 minutes, Bui." The forensic analyst's name was Wei Chen, and she was 37 years old, and she had the specific quality of precision that made her, in Sandra Obi's estimation, the best forensic visual analyst in the state. She had the first frame of the video on her screen at a resolution that made the individual pixels of the coat visible, and she studied it for 22 minutes before she called Sandra back. She said the coat was dark navy or black, difficult to determine exact color in the kitchen's warm-tone lighting. It appeared to be a medium-weight outer jacket, likely insulated, with a specific detail visible at the collar, a logo or brand patch, partially visible above the chair back. She had enhanced the patch. It was circular, white on dark fabric, with text that was recoverable at approximately 60% legibility. A letter that was clearly a C, followed by partial letters consistent with a brand name. She was running it against a database of outerwear brand logos. She would have a match or a short list within 2 hours. Sandra said, "What else?" Wei said, "The shadow I marked on the 41st second I've been re-examining. The angle of the shadow is inconsistent with any fixed light source in the kitchen. It's a moving shadow. The person who cast it moved during the recording. Specifically, they moved between the 29th second, when the shape in the hallway is visible, and the 41st second, when the shadow appears in the lower right of the frame. They moved from the hallway toward the kitchen during the recording, while Mia was facing the camera." Sandra said, "They moved closer." Wei said, "Yes." There was a pause. Sandra said, "She still didn't react." Wei said, "No," which is either because she didn't hear them or because, Sandra said, "because she knew who it was." Wei said, "That's your department." Sandra said, "Yes, it is." The logo came back in 90 minutes. Wei sent Sandra a message with a photograph. A circular patch, white on dark navy, the letters spelling Crestline Outdoor Co., a mid-range outdoor gear brand sold primarily through sporting goods chains across the Southeast. It was not a luxury brand and not a discount brand, the kind of jacket that was common enough to be unhelpful on its own, but specific enough with additional narrowing to be useful. Sandra cross-referenced it with the evidence log from Mia's apartment. No jacket from this brand was logged. No dark navy jacket of any brand was logged as belonging to Mia in her wardrobe in the closet, and the coat hooks showed two coats, a mustard yellow pea coat and a gray puffer. The navy jacket on the chair in the video was not hers. Sandra logged this formally. Unidentified jacket. Wait, Crestline Outdoor KO brand, visible in video frame 00:00:01, not present at the crime scene. Ownership unknown. She pinned a photograph of the still frame on the board. She drew a line from it to a blank card. Marnier. The blank card was where the answer was going to go when she found it. She was going to find it. She was very close. She could feel the specific shape of it, the outline of what had happened in that apartment, forming in her mind the way a photograph develops, slowly, detail by detail, emerging from what was previously formless. Marcus Webb, apartment 4B, the restraining order. The 8-week residency had become a media fixation by the end of the first week. True crime communities had found his prior restraining order through public records and had posted about it widely. His name and face were circulating on 3 platforms. Oh, he had not left his apartment in 4 days. He had called the police station twice, according to the front desk log, asking to speak to the lead detective not with information, but with fear. He was afraid. He was a man with a prior restraining order living across the hall from a murdered woman, and he was very, very afraid of what people were concluding. Sandra Obi went to interview him on day 8. She sat across from him in his apartment, which was small and orderly, and had a wall of houseplants that he watered while she watched, his hands needing something to do, and she listened to him talk for 45 minutes. He told her about the restraining order. His former neighbor had accused him of leaving items outside her door that had turned out, when investigated, needed to be packages mistakenly delivered to his address that he had simply placed in the hallway. The order had been filed and then never renewed because, he said, the woman had eventually acknowledged the misunderstanding. He said it with the specific pain of someone who has carried a mischaracterized moment for years. He said he barely knew Mia. They had waved in the hallway twice. He had held the elevator for her once. He said, "I keep thinking I should have known something was wrong. I live across the hall. How did I not know?" Sandra watched him water his plants. She believed him. Not because he was a good performer, he wasn't. He was clearly terrified and barely keeping himself together. But because belief and evidence had, after 45 minutes, arrived at the same place. Marcus Webb had not been inside Mia Calloway's apartment. So she knew it the way she knew things when 14 years of reading people had produced something close to reliable instinct. She drew a line through his name on the board, which left the coat, which left the shape in the hallway, which left Colin Vreed, whose photography account had been created 7 weeks ago, who had messaged Mia 6 weeks ago and been left on read, who had sent a message 4 days before her death saying "small world," who had commented on the video at 2:17 a.m. from a diner 4 miles away, and again at 4:44 a.m. from his home address. Sandra pulled up everything on Colin Vreed that was publicly available. His photography account, 312 followers, landscape photographs, active for 7 weeks. Prior to that, nothing. No other social media accounts under his name that she could find. No Facebook, no Twitter, no LinkedIn, a Tennessee driver's license, a rental apartment in Wedgwood, Houston, employment records showing he had worked as a freelance graphic designer, which meant he worked from home and set his own hours, which meant his schedule was entirely his own and entirely unverifiable. She called the number associated with his Tennessee license. It rang 7 times and went to voicemail. The voicemail said, "You've reached Colin, leave a message." She did not leave a message. She requested a warrant for his phone records. She requested a warrant for his apartment. She requested a warrant for the Instagram account's registration data, specifically any message content that had been sent and subsequently deleted. Because she knew from her work and from Way's analysis of the deleted comment accounts, that deleted did not mean gone. And Colin Vreed had sent at least one message to Mia Calloway that was no longer visible in the thread Danny had found. She knew this because the platform's metadata showed a gap. Between the seventh message in the thread and what appeared to be the final message, the timestamp skipped 4 days. Someone had deleted a message, probably more than one. And Sandra Obi wanted to know what those messages said more than she had wanted anything in this case. The Instagram warrant came through on day 11. The platform's legal response team, operating under a priority processing protocol that Sandra's lieutenant had invoked, delivered the account data for @colin.v.photo within 18 hours of the warrant being served. Sandra opened the file at 6:45 in the morning, before anyone else was in the office. Washed with a coffee she did not taste, in the specific focused calm of a person who has been waiting for something and is now being very careful not to rush. The account data was comprehensive: registration information, login history, all messages sent and received, including deleted messages, which the platform retained for 30 days before permanent deletion. The warrant had arrived with 6 days to spare. There were 11 messages in the thread between colin.v.photo and Mia Calloway's account that Danny had not seen deleted from the sender's side, which had collapsed them in the visible thread but left them intact in the back-end data. Sandra read all 11. She read them twice. Then she sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment and then forward at the screen again, because looking away felt wrong. It felt like losing contact with something important. The messages told a story that was not the story of a photographer seeking a creative collaboration. They told the story of someone who had decided that Mia Calloway was part of his life before she had agreed to any such thing. The first deleted message was sent 3 days after the initial contact. It said, "I was at Fido's on the 21st today. I think I saw you studying in the window. The small world keeps getting smaller." Mia had not responded. The second, sent 5 days later, "I took some photos near the Vanderbilt campus last week. You have a really distinctive way of walking. I hope that's not weird to say." The third, I heard 1 week after that, "I've started to understand your posting schedule. You always post late. Night owl or just a busy student?" Sandra stopped at this one. She read it again. "I've started to understand your posting schedule." This was not a message from someone who had stumbled across a TikTok and admired it. This was a message from someone who had been watching, mapping, learning. She kept reading. The 4th through 7th messages tracked a slow escalation, each one slightly more familiar in tone, each one referencing a specific detail about Mia's life that could only be known by someone paying very close attention. The coffee shop she went to on Saturday mornings, the color of her backpack, the clinical rotation building she entered and exited. Each message phrased carefully complimentary, not overtly threatening, the specific register of someone who understood that a single message that crossed a line would prompt a block. He was staying just inside the line while moving the line. It was methodical. It was practiced. And when Sandra got to the 8th deleted message sent 12 days before Mia's death, she stopped completely. It said, "I was in your building yesterday. The super was fixing the mailbox. I wanted to say hi, but you were already in the elevator. Next time." Sandra read it 4 times. Colin Vrede had been in Mia's building. He had been close enough to see her at the elevator. And at this point, 12 days before her death, after weeks of messages she had never responded to, she had still not blocked him. Sandra held this fact carefully because it was easy to read as passivity or naivete. And it was neither. It was the response of someone who was afraid that blocking might escalate something that was currently manageable. But she had seen this as pattern in cases before: the victim who does not block because they are afraid of what happens if they provoke, who leaves the messages unread but present because having them visible feels safer than the uncertainty of disappearance. Mia had not blocked Colin Vrede because she was afraid, and she had been right to be afraid. The 9th deleted message was sent 8 days before her death. "I know your schedule pretty well now. I feel like I know you, even without you saying anything back." Does that make sense? The 10th, 5 days before her death, the same day Mia had asked her mother the hypothetical question about being believed, said, "I found out which apartment you're in. I'm not going to do anything with that. I just wanted you to know I know." And the 11th and final deleted message, she sent 3 days before her death, was 4 words: "I have a key." Sandra Obi read those 4 words, and then she put both hands flat on her desk and breathed. She did not immediately move. She sat with those 4 words because they needed to be sat with, because they were, in the context of everything that came before them, the confirmation of everything she had feared and the worst possible version of what the video had suggested. He had a key. How he had a key was a question she would answer. But the answer to how mattered less right now than the fact that she had a direct, documented, timestamp message from Colin Vreede to Mia Calloway stating that he had access to her apartment. She called Ray Horton. She said, "Come in, now." He said, "How bad?" She said, "Come in." She sent a message to the warrant team for Vreede's apartment. And she sent a message to the forensic team. She sent a message to the lieutenant. She put the 4 words on the board in block letters, "I have a key." And underneath them, in smaller letters, she wrote the question that was going to be answered before this day was over. How did he get it? The answer, when it came, was both simpler and more horrible than Sandra had anticipated. The building superintendent, who had been cooperating with the investigation throughout, was brought in at 8 a.m. and asked specifically about any key-related maintenance or issues in the building over the past 2 months. He said that 6 weeks ago, a resident had reported a lost apartment key and requested a replacement. The resident was not Mia Calloway. It was a tenant on the 2nd floor, an older woman who had been living in the building for 9 years and was considered entirely reliable. The super had replaced her key without question. Standard procedure. He had issued a new key, but the woman, when Sandra called her, said she had never lost her key. She had never reported a lost key. She had no idea what the super was talking about. Oh my God. The key had been reported lost by someone impersonating her. The building's log, a paper sign-in sheet kept at the super's office, showed that the key request had been signed with her name, in handwriting that was not hers, on a Thursday afternoon 6 weeks ago. The super had not noticed. He worked alone. He had given a key to the building's front door, which used a master key system that accessed all floors to someone he thought was a long-term tenant. And that key, when once duplicated or used to access a key cutting service, would have opened any door in the building that used the standard lock system. Including apartment 4A, Sandra put it all on the board. She drew the lines. The picture was almost complete. One thing remained: placing Colin Vreede inside the apartment on the night of the video. The coat was a start, but she needed more. This was what Sandra Obi had not told anyone. Not her lieutenant, not Ray Horton, not the forensic team. She had been carrying it for 11 days since the morning she had watched the video for the 12th time and saw something that had rearranged the entire shape of the case in her mind. She had kept it close because she was not yet certain, and in cases like this, uncertainty shared too early becomes theory, and theory becomes assumption. Yeah, and assumption becomes the thing that makes you miss the real answer. But she was certain now. She pulled Ray Horton into her office at 9:30, closed the door, and told him. She said, "There were 2 people in that apartment." Horton said, "The shape in the hallway and the shadow in the corner." Sandra said, "Yes, but I don't think they were together." Horton stared at her. Sandra pulled up the video. She played it. She paused at the 29th second, the shape in the hallway. She said, "This person is in the hallway, standing still, watching." She played forward to the 41st second, the shadow in the lower right corner of the frame, the one that moved. She said, "This person is in the kitchen, behind the camera's left edge, moving." She looked at Horton. "The shape in the hallway is watching Mia. But the shadow in the corner is watching the shape in the hallway." Horton was very quiet. Sandra said, "2 people entered that apartment. One of them came in with a key and positioned himself in the hallway. The other one came in after or was already there and was watching from the side." She paused. "The question I've been trying to answer for 11 days is, did they know each other? Were they working together? Or were there 2 separate people in that apartment who didn't know the other one was there?" Horton said, "How is that possible?" Sandra said, "It's possible if one person had a key and came in quietly, and another person was already inside someone Mia had let in, someone she knew, someone she had chosen, for reasons we don't yet understand, not to tell anyone about." The phone records for Colin Vreede's number came through at 10:15. Sandra and Horton went through them together. On Thursday night, the night of the video, Vreede's phone had pinged a cell tower at 11:43 p.m. that placed him within a half-mile radius of Mia's building. By 12:30 a.m. it had moved, pinging a tower closer to the Nolensville Road corridor, consistent with the diner where the 2:17 a.m. comment had been posted. By 4:40 a.m., it was pinging the tower nearest his Wedgwood, Houston apartment. The movement was consistent with what Sandra had theorized. He had been at or near Mia's building at the time of the video, had left at some point before or shortly after midnight, had gone to the diner, had made the comment, had gone home. His phone had not been turned off. His phone had not been in airplane mode. Look, he had carried it with him through the entire night, pinging towers at each location, creating a trail that was almost absurdly easy to follow, which either meant he was not worried about being traced or he was not smart enough to know he should be worried. In Sandra's experience, these were often the same thing, but the phone records also showed something she had not expected. At 11:31 p.m., 21 minutes before Mia posted the video, Vrede had received a text message. Not from Mia's number, from a number she did not recognize. The message content was not recoverable from the phone records alone. She would need the device for that, but the fact of the message was there, time-stamped, flagged. Someone had texted Colin Vrede at 11:31 p.m., 21 minutes before Mia's video went live. She needed to know who. Once she ran the number, it came back to a prepaid cell, a burner phone, purchased with cash, no registered owner. She sent it to the digital forensics team. She asked them to pull any available data tower pings, purchase location, anything. Then she went back to the board and looked at the full picture. Colin Vrede, the deleted messages, the key, the phone records placing him at the building, the coat on the chair, the shape in the hallway, the shadow in the corner, the deleted comment accounts, and now an unknown number, texting Vrede 21 minutes before the video from a burner phone. She added it to the board. She stared at the board for a long time. Something was still not connecting. Not the facts, which were connecting clearly, but the shape behind the facts. Well, the why of a specific detail that had been bothering her since the beginning and that she had not yet fully articulated even to herself. She went back to the video. She played it one more time. She watched Mia, the ease, the grin, the good night. She paused on the grin. She looked at it, and then she said to the empty office. She recorded it in one take. Horton looked at her from across the room. Sandra said, she'd never re-recorded her videos. I checked her drafts folder, and she had 17 draft videos saved from the previous 3 months. She always checked them before posting. Always reviewed. She paused. This one she posted in one take without reviewing. She looked at the paused frame, Mia's grin, the finger guns, the good night. She knew someone was in the apartment. She knew. And she made the video anyway. And she posted it without reviewing it, without deleting it, without doing anything that might make the person behind her suspicious. Sandra paused. She posted it because she wanted us to find it. She was leaving us evidence, 47 seconds of evidence, and she did it while the person who was going to kill her was standing in her hallway. 11 days before she died, Mia Calloway had researched something on her phone. The digital forensics unit found it in her browser history, in a search conducted at 2:13 a.m. a time, when she should have been asleep and was not, a time when the apartment was dark and she was lying in her bed with the screen, glow the only light, typing into a search bar with the careful, deliberate strokes of someone who did not want autocomplete to finish the sentence. Mish, the search was, if someone is in your house and you can't call 911, what can you do? It returned a range of results, safety articles, true crime forums, a Reddit thread. Her phone showed she had been on one of those results for 11 minutes, the Reddit thread. She had read it at 2 in the morning, 11 days before her death, and it contained Sandra, found it, went to it, read the same thread advice from multiple people about exactly this scenario. About being in a situation where a direct call is impossible, about how to create evidence without alerting a threat, about how to use a phone in a way that looked ordinary and wasn't, about how to leave something behind that could be found. One comment in the thread, Ed, posted by a user whose account was 3 years old and had 2,000 karma, said, if you can, make a video. Don't look at them. Act normal. But make a video and post it publicly somewhere so it can't be deleted. The evidence exists the second it goes live. Mia had read that comment. Sandra knew she had read it because the browser history showed she had been on that specific page for 11 minutes. And the page was not long. And then she had closed the browser and presumably gone back to trying to sleep and had lived 10 more days with whatever she knew and whatever she feared. And on the 11th day at 11:52 p.m. on a Thursday night, when she heard or sensed that someone was in her apartment, she had done exactly what the Reddit comment had told her to do. She had opened TikTok. She had chosen the most popular trending audio of the week, the one that had 6 million uses. Was the one that anyone seeing her account would interpret as ordinary, as exactly the kind of video she always posted. She had set up her phone on the kitchen counter, facing her, a position she used regularly. Easily explained. She had pressed the record and she had performed. For 47 seconds, she had performed the most important act of her life. And she had done it with enough composure that 41 million people had watched it, and only one detective on the 7th watch had looked past the performance to what it was recording. She had lip-synced and widened her eyes and narrowed them and done the slow, mock disbelief blink, and she had not looked at the hallway, not once, not for a fraction of a second, because looking at the hallway would have told the person in the hallway that she knew they were there. And telling the person in the hallway that she knew was the most dangerous thing she could have done. She had looked at the camera. She had pointed finger guns at the camera. She had said good night, loves, and she had posted it without reviewing it. Because reviewing it would have taken time she may not have had, and because she understood that the moment it was posted publicly, it existed independently of her phone, independently of her apartment, independently of anything anyone in that hallway could do to stop it. She had made herself a public witness to her own final hour. And she had done it at 22 years old with the composure that made Sandra Obi, sitting in her office 11 days later, press both hands flat on her desk and look at the ceiling for a long time before she could continue. The coat on the chair was Colin Vrede's. Sandra knew it before the confirmation came, but the confirmation came on day 12 through a process she had not anticipated. The Crestline Outdoor CO jacket logo search, combined with a cross-reference of online retail purchase records obtained through a separate financial warrant, produced a hit, a jacket of that brand in navy, in size large, purchased 11 weeks ago from a sporting goods chain in Nashville. The purchase was made in cash, but the purchase location had security cameras, and the security camera footage pulled by Sandra's team with a third-party warrant showed the transaction. A man in his early 30s, dark-haired, medium build, purchasing the jacket at a register. Sandra compared the footage to Colin Vrede's driver's license photograph. She sent both to Wei Chen. Sri Wei's response came back in 40 minutes. 87% facial match. Consistent. Recommend confirmation through live comparison or additional imaging. 87% was not a courtroom number, but it was enough to get the warrant for Vrede's apartment. And the apartment, when Sandra and Horton and 2 officers entered it at 2 p.m. on day 12 with the warrant signed and the forensic team behind them, contained the confirmation she needed. In the closet, a dark navy insulated jacket, Crestline Outdoor CO, size large. On the left sleeve, a small fiber of fabric that Wei Chen would later identify as matching the cotton blend of the gray oversized hoodie Mia Calloway had been wearing in her final video. He had been close enough to her that night for fabric transfer to occur. He had been within touching distance. And he had left his jacket in her apartment and left it on the chair. The most ordinary domestic gesture, the gesture of someone who expects to come back. The burner phone that had texted Vrede at 11:31 p.m. was never identified to an owner. The tower ping data placed it within the same half-mile radius as Vrede's phone at the time of the message, which meant whoever sent it was in the same area, possibly inside the building. The message content was never recovered. What the phone data did reveal, through a cross-reference of towers that Sandra had not initially pursued but that Wei Chen suggested on day 13, was that the burner phone had been active in the vicinity of Mia's building on 4 separate occasions over the previous 6 weeks, always during hours consistent with Mia's schedule, always for short periods of time, and always from the same general location. It had been there, watching, timing, and it had texted Colin Vrede on the night of the video, which meant that at 11:31 p.m., 21 minutes before Mia posted the 47-second video, Someone had told Colin Vreed something. Sandra did not know what. She built the case without it. She did not need it. She had the jacket. She had the fiber. She had the deleted messages, 11 of them, the last saying, "I have a key." She had the phone records placing him at the building. She had the diner footage from the 2:17 a.m. comment. She had the second comment traced to his home address. She had the key access history from the building. She had enough. She closed the board. She opened the arrest documentation. She called the DA's office. And while she did all of this, just the video, 47 seconds, lip sync, finger guns, good night, kept running on 41 million screens across the world. Mia Calloway, looking at the camera, the shape in the hallway behind her, still and watching, and the evidence she left, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the seventh watch. Colin Vreed was arrested on day 14 at 6:42 in the morning at his Wedgwood, Houston apartment. He answered the door in a gray t-shirt and dark sweatpants, barefoot, holding a coffee mug. He looked at Sandra and the officers behind her, and he went very still, the specific stillness of someone who has been waiting for a knock and has finally heard it. He did not run. He did not speak. He set the coffee mug down on the table beside the door with the careful precision of a person doing an ordinary thing in an extraordinary moment because it was the only ordinary thing available. He extended his wrist for the handcuffs without being asked. In the car, he said nothing. At the station, he said nothing. His court-appointed attorney arrived at 9 a.m. and spoke to him privately for 40 minutes. At 10:15, the attorney came out and said his client would like to make a statement. Sandra went in. She sat across the table from Colin Vreed and looked at him for the first time with nothing between them, not a one-way mirror, not a screen, not the proximate distance of two people at the same crime scene. He was 31 years old and he looked less substantial than she had expected. Not menacing, not dramatic, just an ordinary-looking man sitting in a chair who had made choices that had ended a young woman's life. She had seen this before. She had learned to stop expecting monsters to look monstrous. She opened her notepad. She said, "Start from the beginning." And he did. He had found Mia's account 8 weeks ago. He had been scrolling TikTok at 2 in the morning in his apartment. He described this without apparent irony, without understanding that the specific detail of 2 in the morning said something about the state he was in, and her video had appeared on his For You page. A study break video. She was explaining some nursing concept using kitchen objects as his props, laughing at herself when the metaphor broke down. He had watched it 3 times. He had gone to her page and watched every video she had posted in the previous 4 months. And he said, "She made me feel like she was talking to me, like we already knew each other." He said this without apparent awareness that it was not a feeling Mia had intended to create in him specifically, that it was the quality of warmth she brought to every interaction, the quality that had built a community of 180,000 people who all felt to varying degrees that she was talking to them. He had created the photography account as a way to approach her. He said this directly, without Sandra prompting it. He had thought that a professional framing would be less likely to be dismissed. He had sent the first message and then kept sending them when she didn't respond, because her not responding did not, to him, mean no. He described this without defensiveness. He described it with the specific detachment of someone who has had many days to review the logic of their own thinking and has not yet arrived at the understanding that the logic was not logic. He said, "I knew her schedule better than she knew I knew it." He said it without pride and without shame, simply as a fact. And Sandra noted the absence of shame as the most revealing detail of the conversation so far. He had obtained the key through the master key system exactly as Sandra had reconstructed. He had impersonated the second-floor tenant at the superintendent's office, who had visited twice before, posing as a prospective tenant looking at available units, learning the layout of the building, learning the super's name and the super's routine. The third visit, he had signed the fake lost key request and walked out with a master key. When he had been in Mia's building multiple times, he had stood outside her apartment door. He said he had gone inside twice before the night of the video while she was at her clinical shift, using the key, staying for short periods. He said, "I wasn't doing anything. I just wanted to know what her space was like." Sandra wrote this down without changing her expression. He had been inside her apartment, uninvited, twice before the night she died. He had learned the layout. He had learned, presumably, where she kept things, how she arranged her life, the geography of her existence. He had gone in on the night of the video at 11:45 p.m. while she was in the kitchen. He had come in through the front door quietly. He had not expected her to be recording. He said, "When I saw she had her phone out, I didn't know what to do. I just stood there." Sandra said, "You stood in the hallway." He said, "Yes." She said, "And then you moved closer." He looked at the table. He said, "Yes." She said, "What happened next?" He looked at the table for a long time. Then he described what had happened next in the kitchen of Mia Calloway's apartment after the video ended and the 47 seconds were over. Once Sandra wrote it all down, she did not look away from him while he spoke. She had stopped feeling anything in the room and started simply recording, because that was what the moment required. When he finished, she closed her notepad. She said, "The second person, the shadow in the corner. Who was that?" He looked up at her. He said, "What second person?" And Sandra looked at him and understood, for the first time, that Colin Vreede genuinely did not know there had been anyone else in the apartment that night. He had been in the hallway. He had moved into the kitchen. And he had not known, had not seen that the shadow in the lower right corner of the 47-second video did not belong to him. The burner phone was never traced to an owner. The second shadow was never conclusively identified. This was the one thread Sandra Obi never fully closed, the one loose end that she carried out of the case the way detectives sometimes carry loose ends. Not because the case required it, but because she required it. Because her specific quality of attention would not allow her to release it entirely. She had theories. She had a person in mind, someone from the earlier stages of the investigation whose behavior had been fully explained by one reading and only partially explained by another. She did not have evidence sufficient for a charge. She did not have evidence sufficient for a name on a board with a string attached. She had a shadow in the lower right corner of a 47-second video, one frame, cast at an angle that no fixed object in the apartment could explain, much by a person who had been in that kitchen and who Colin Vreede had not known about. She kept the frame saved on her work computer. She looked at it sometimes, on late nights when the office was empty. She did not stop looking. Colin Vreede was charged with first-degree murder, criminal trespass, identity theft in connection with the key acquisition, and multiple counts of criminal harassment relating to the deleted messages. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution's case was built around 5 pillars: the deleted messages, the key acquisition, the phone records placing him at the building, the jacket fiber, and the video itself, which was played in its entirety for the jury on the first day of trial. The forensic analyst Wei Chen testified for 4 hours about the shape in the hallway, the shadow on the 41st second, the logo on the jacket, and the fiber evidence. She was precise and patient, and the jury listened with a collective stillness that the court reporter later said she had never seen sustained for that long. The deleted messages were read into the record in full, all 11 of them, in order by the prosecutor in a quiet, even voice that made them more devastating than any dramatic reading could have. The last one, "I have a key," was followed by a silence in the courtroom that lasted approximately 4 seconds before the prosecutor moved to the next exhibit. 4 seconds is a long time when a room is completely silent. The jury felt it. The verdict, after 2 days of deliberation, was guilty on all charges. The sentence, delivered 6 weeks later, was life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Danny Cho attended every day of the trial. She sat in the third row of the gallery, on the left side, with Mia's parents, her mother and father, who had driven up from Knoxville and rented an apartment for the duration of the proceedings because they needed to be present, needed to be in the room where the truth about their daughter was being established in the formal, permanent, legal way that truth gets established. Mia's mother sat very straight throughout the trial. She did not cry in the courtroom. She cried privately, in the rented apartment, in the early morning hours before they drove to the courthouse, in the spaces between things. In the courtroom, she watched and listened with the same quality of complete attention that Mia had been known for, the same quality that her nursing supervisor Claudette had called natural, the quality that Mia had inherited from somewhere. When the verdict came, Mia's mother reached over and took Danny's hand without looking at her. Danny held on. They sat that way through the remainder of the proceedings, two people who had loved the same person in different ways, connected by the specific weight of a loss that does not become lighter with the verdict but becomes perhaps differently shaped. Something that can be carried further even if it cannot be put down. Sandra Obi submitted her final case report on the afternoon of the sentencing. She walked out of the courthouse into a Nashville afternoon early spring, the kind of day that Tennessee produces in late February, without warning, bright and warmer than the day before. The sky very blue, and the trees beginning to suggest something that is not yet leaves. She stood on the courthouse steps for a moment. She thought about Mia Calloway at 11:52 p.m. on a Thursday night, setting her phone on the counter, pressing record, performing 47 seconds of ordinary content in the presence of extraordinary danger. She thought about the Reddit thread at 2 in the morning. Make a video and post it publicly somewhere so it can't be deleted. She thought about the fact that a 22-year-old nursing student who was afraid and alone and could not call anyone had found in the resources available to her a way to be her own witness, had understood in the moment of crisis that the camera was the one tool she had used it with a composure that Sandra, across 14 years of investigating the worst things people do to each other, had never seen equaled. The video was still online. The platform had added a memorial designation to Mia's account, a small symbol in the header, a quiet acknowledgement. The account had 420,000 followers now, gained entirely after her death. People still commented on the final video. New comments every day. Some were in grief, some were angry, some were the specific kind of tribute that people leave when they feel they have witnessed something that mattered, something worth marking, worth returning to. In the months that followed the trial, two things happened that were not part of any investigation and not part of any formal proceeding, but that Sandra Obi thought about more than she thought about almost anything else connected to the case. The first, Mia's nursing school, in partnership with Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Minta established a scholarship in her name for nursing students who demonstrated what the application called exceptional advocacy in patient care. The first recipient was announced at a ceremony in May. The second, a safety organization partnered with multiple social media platforms to create a feature announced, developed, and funded in the 14 months following Mia's death that allowed users to flag and store video content as emergency evidence directly from within the app, with encryption that protected it from deletion by anyone other than law enforcement with appropriate authorization. The feature was named quietly, without fanfare, in the technical documentation only, the Calloway Protocol. Sandra found out about it from a tech journalist who called her for comment. She said she didn't have a comment. She hung up. She sat for a moment. Then she went back to her desk and opened the case file one more time, not to add anything, not to change anything, just to look at the still frame she kept saved. Mia Calloway at the 29th second. The grin not yet on her face, the finger guns not yet raised, the good night not yet said. And behind her in the dark glass of the kitchen window, the shape in the hallway that had always been there and that 41 million people had almost entirely missed. Sandra looked at it for a long time. Then she closed the file. She did not delete it. She never would. She just closed it and turned off her desk lamp and went home through the Nashville spring, where the trees were doing what they always did, coming back, returning, insisting on continuation, and the city moved around her with the ordinary, persistent, yet indifferent energy of a place that does not pause for any particular grief. She walked through it anyway, she always did,